Because this is the history. This is where Avraham Avinu walked from Hebron to Yerushalayim for the Akedah. This is where the Jews lived. This was the community. This was the heart of the Jewish community,
right?
In temple times, 2,000 years ago. And then more recently, they settled there when the people came back, and they fought to stay there before 1948. But when the war broke out, before 1948, before the State of Israel, when the Arabs started the war, right? I think people don't always understand. They were talking about the War of Independence was the war after the declaration of the state. The next day, other nations attacked, but the war had been going on for a few months already. You are listening to the JP Show,
where we discuss the issues you care about from a Jewish perspective.
I am Rabbi G.
And I am Rabbi Levi.
And we hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome back, everyone, to another JP Show. Last week, I spoke to you from the Holy Land of Israel. I am back. I came back yesterday. I can't tell you that I'm fully awake, but
yeah, fair enough.
I am back. Physically tired, but very pumped up after an amazing experience.
And it sounded like it was incredible.
It was incredible. I should take this opportunity to thank Rabbi Levi for holding the fort and taking care of all the unexpected BINA stuff that happened last week.
Right.
I was away. But yes, it was good. So
last week we did very, very briefly about your trip. You were sort of in the thick of it. So I thought this week we would properly deconstruct it a little bit more and see how it was. So first of all, when was the last time you were in Israel, just in general? I'm saying nothing to do with October 7th.
COVID.
Before COVID.
Just before COVID. I came back, and a few weeks later, COVID exploded.
Yeah.
I was in Tel Aviv most of the time because I was there for a wedding which took place in Tel Aviv.
Right. So it's been 5 years.
Yeah, something like that. Before that, I think 3 years before that, I was in Israel. Myself and your mother and your sister.
Right. So how did it feel to be back?
It's amazing. Israel always feels like home, and especially in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is just, I don't know. Jerusalem is the most amazing place, I think.
Yeah.
Just walking the streets of Jerusalem. This time we were quite near the old city, actually. I stayed in the sort of the center of town near the Heichal Shlomo and World Mizrahi. It's, I think the place is called Rechavia. My geography is not fantastic, but it's quite not a road.
I heard you mastered the walk to the Kotel. You sort of worked out how to get there.
No, I did not do it myself.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
I didn't.
Wouldn't be. There's certain places in Jerusalem that you don't want to land up. If you take a wrong corner, they're probably not the best.
But I did walk. One of the most amazing things is I walked on twice. I went very early in the morning to daven at the Kotel. There's this concept of some people daven when the sun rises, like the Amidah when the sun rises, which is this time of the year, varies in time of the year, but this time it meant that Shacharit would start like about 5:15 a.m. So walking 5 o'clock in the morning through the alleyways of the old city, it's quiet, it's beautiful, it's just the most amazing feeling.
Right. And I think part of it, before we get to like the things that are happening in Israel now, but I think part of it is when you think about it, like you're walking the streets of Jerusalem, the same streets that Jews walked, 3,000 years ago?
Correct. I mean, I was looking at the city of David, where King David wrote the Tehillim 3,000 years ago.
Yeah. Which is incredible. It's like this feeling of continuation, like it hasn't stopped.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So what was sorry?
No, it's powerful. It's very, very powerful. I mean,
yeah. And there's definitely something in the air there that's unusual. It's like
there's such an energy there. It's incredible.
Yeah. So what would you say was the highlight of the trip? I mean, I'm sure there were many. What was the most?
Look, this trip we went with the whole group of rabbis and Rebbesons, and really it was a solidarity trip kind of officially the idea was to give them strength, show them our support for them. But actually the truth is they gave us much more than we gave them. At least I could talk about that personally anyways. I think the highlight can be summed up into a few little things. It's a nation in pain. and yet incredibly resilient and positive and full of faith and strength and conviction, and they have a real sense of purpose. But it's not a resilience. Sometimes a person says they're okay and they're resilient, but they're in denial, and therefore they've never really dealt with anything. They are not in denial at all. We had some very, very emotional days there. We saw some very painful things. But the people who spoke to us are not shy of talking about the pain. They were really great speakers. They sort of brought us into the pain a little bit. And yet always but we've got to rebuild, and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to be victorious, and recognizing God's hand, and even secular people, like amazing stuff. They have such a drive and such a sense of purpose there, which is incredible. One woman spoke to us one night from the UIA, works in Israel, and she had a sentence which kind of sort of sums it up. She says, "We're broken, but we're unbreakable."
Yeah. Which is a contradiction, but that's what being Jewish is all about.
Yeah, and they do it really well there. And we need to really learn from them, because, throughout my months before that, I was talking to people here who kind of, everything, sometimes every time something happened in Israel, they were a bit down, and they were, that kind of thing. And I got a lot of questions, how can you go on, and how can we function properly, and all that kind of stuff. And everyone understood that the answer is not just to forget about it, because that's insensitive and that's not good. We need to be thinking about Israel all the time. But then if you think about it too much, then you get down, you get despondent, and so on. So I kind of always said, look, because I've seen a couple of videos and things, all the stuff we've seen together. But I always said, look, why don't we ask the people who are actually going through the pain? And I knew that was true, but I actually hadn't experienced it. To experience it was amazing.
Yeah, for sure. I think Israel is listed as one of the happiest places on earth. I know it probably went down a little bit through the war, but it's still pretty high up there.
Fourth place to fifth place, that's all.
Yeah, which is pretty crazy, actually. But I think it's probably, it sounds crazy on the surface, but I think it's we've spoken about this a lot, that happiness doesn't come from things going well. Happiness comes from meaning and purpose, and they definitely have that there.
Yeah. And they see it as a mission, a purpose. Rabbi Perez spoke to us. He went through a lot himself, and he spoke the same way. And he said, he used the expression, "It's a painful privilege."
Yeah,
but it's a privilege, and they see it that way.
Yeah, which is amazing.
There's an amazing amount of joy, and they're still living and loving life. It's incredible. Restaurants are full. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But people are committed. People are risking their lives to defend the land and defend Am Yisrael, and it's just incredible.
Sure. So, what was your encounters with the soldiers like? I know you went to
a
barbecue with them.
Soldiers Festival in Tel HaShomer, where there's the injured soldiers.
How was that?
We didn't go to the area that they're very severely injured, but went to an area where they're injured. They're definitely injured, and spoke to them. I spoke to one. He says, "No, yeah." He talked to me. He spoke to me about a rise in emunah. He says, "There's more emunah now. There's more faith in God now. We've got to finish the war. We've got to do it." It's like unbelievable. And we went to an army base where we did a barbecue with the soldiers and had a chance to speak to them. I put on film with some of them. Also, the same sentiment. They're driven.
Right. So Shabbos, you spent in a place called Alon Shvut, which is not your usual destination when you go to Israel. Just to be
something
honest.
Different. I was part of a group.
Yeah, it's not your community per se. It's not your, we know a lot of people that have learned there. So obviously, it probably was very insightful for you to go there.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
So how was that experience?
It was beautiful. It was a beautiful place. I didn't understand the history of it. First of all, one of the things in this trip is I learned a tremendous amount. About the war, about the amazing miracles that happened through the war, but the amazing challenges. I learned a lot about the evacuation of cities that, I didn't understand the challenges they were going through, and learned about a lot of history and a lot of really important stuff. But Shabbos was in a place called Alon Shvut, which is Gush Etzion. That's the municipality. Gush Etzion is made up of a bunch of different yeshuvim. And we had a whole tour and a whole explanation of them. But it's actually very rich in history. I think people, when they hear about it, they look at it as like these new settlements that were built, right? It's not new at all.
Right.
It's new in the sense because they lost it all in 1948. But actually, it's the heart of what we call Judea. It's the heart of Yehuda. between Hebron and Yerushalayim, right? And it's incredible. And that's where this, in the second temple, don't forget, we have in our history the 10 tribes were lost. The 10 tribes went into exile in the first temple, right? The second temple, that was the basis of the Jewish community, right? It's right next to where Hanukkah happened. They have found, this is the incredible part here, we were on a merpese, like a balcony. There's a beautiful view out of the whole Gush Etzion, and they were showing us different areas. There's Jewish areas and Arab areas. They found things there that dates back to the time of the Chashmonaim, the time of Hanukkah.
That's unbelievable.
And they fought for it, and the community settled there, and they wanted to live there when people came back to Israel, because this is the history. This is where Avraham Avinu walked from Hebron to Yerushalayim for the Akedah. This is where the Jews lived. This was the community. This was the heart of the Jewish community,
right?
In temple times, 2,000 years ago. And then more recently, they settled there when the people came back, and they fought to stay there before 1948. But when the war broke out, before 1948, before the State of Israel, when the Arabs started the war, right? I think people don't always understand. They were talking about the War of Independence was the war after the declaration of the state. The next day, other nations attacked, but the war had been going on for a few months already, internally. And then the day before the declaration, which is today Yom HaZikaron, the Gush fell.
Right.
And they were killed. A lot of the men were killed. The women had already evacuated a few weeks before. And then when 67 happened, they wanted to return. These are not new settlements. Certainly not occupational, that rubbish that people talk about.
Yes, like the media portrays it like that, but obviously it's not like that.
New thing, sprung apples, all Arab land, it's nonsense. This was the heart of the Jewish living, right?
That's amazing. Wow. There is an expression called you can't compare hearing about something to seeing something, right?
Yeah.
So obviously you saw a big part of the trip was you went down south and you saw the devastation. Did it touch you differently? I mean, we obviously knew about everything and we read about everything, or you lived through it.
Not a question. We went, the second day of our trip went down south, and we had a lot of education about what happened there. October 7th, exactly how it happened, and the security and not the security, and the people who were there. The whole thing that we saw near Oz, which is just heartbreaking. There's just all the houses just.
That's where the Bibas family's from, is near Oz?
I was in the Bibas family, not in the house, but outside the house.
Right.
It's heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking. And I just came away from this day saying that from October 7th, from Simchat Torah, I read a lot, saw a lot of videos, thought I knew what happened, and actually had no idea. Like it's a whole different experience. On both levels. First of all, to understand the real pain, but also understand the miracles that happened. I'll tell you one thing. It was actually, we drove down this road and we pointed out, where they came to. They actually came very far into Israel.
Really?
Relatively speaking. And they were going to go a lot further. What I didn't know was, fascinating enough, is that they were distracted a bit by the Nova Festival. Tragically, very tragically, of course, how many, 250 people, I think, died there in the Nova Festival.
Yeah, something crazy.
Actually, the fact that it was there saved thousands. Because they were going to go a lot further, and they got bamboozled a bit. They got distracted. They had no idea that it was going to happen. They had October 7th was a very, very carefully planned event. They knew exactly where they were going, what they were going to do, everything. Right? We know that. That's something that we know. But and also just hearing from people who were defending the little issue. We had a guy talk to us. I'll just tell you one thing. I'll just sort of symbolize. I mean, every story sort of happened the same. This theme came up again and again and again in different ways. I'm not going to tell you everything now because I'm talking tomorrow night. For those that want to know, I'm talking tomorrow night on for those who want to contact BINA, a house in Belver Hill. I'm going to tell more stories about Israel experience. But there was this guy called Yiftach, and he gave us a speech. I've forgotten the name of the yeshuv now, of his particular kibbutz. Anyway, they went out to defend this, because he was the guy who's involved now in training first responders. There was an article yesterday in one of the Times of Israel, I think. There's a whole new movement now to train civilians to be first responders. To have more ammunition and guns and things like that. This guy, in his little town, there was nothing, and a bunch of them went out. It's a whole miracle about they managed to close the gate of the issue before they got there. But they went out and they were going to fight. And he says he went out with a rock. It's all he had, never gun, he had a rock. This guy's like a regular secular guy. I wrote about it last week. He's like a medical scientist, whatever. And his brother came also. His brother actually was injured. His brother was shot, but he recovered. And he saw his friend who was coming out with an axe. So he says to his friend, "What are you going to do with the axe?" So his friend said, "Well, what are you going to do with the rock?"
Right.
And he acknowledges, he says it was God's miracles that they survived because the enemy had deactivated, that somehow made it, because they weren't able to close the gate, which you normally electronically. They managed to put something there and block it. A whole miracle. They managed to close the gate before they got there, and eventually they were all saved, most of them. And this guy's talking, they're talking about rebuilding and training first responders and bringing back people who live there properly. And he's smiling and he's full of hope and he's full of things. So I just went over to him after the talk. I'm not one of those guys that likes to ask questions when people are talking. I just listen. But after that, I just had to understand. I went over to him. Remember, he didn't look like a particularly religious person. Most of them in the South actually weren't. And I walked up to him and I said, his name's Yiftach, and I said, "Thank you so much for this talk, but can you just tell me one thing? How do you stay so positive and strong?" He looks at me as if I'm mad. And he says, "What do you mean? We're Jewish. The Jewish spirit. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. We always come back. We're always strong. This is what God wants us. This is what God wants us to do, and we have to do this. It's like unbelievable."
Yeah. That is amazing. Okay. Anything else you want to share?
Well, maybe we should. Anyone here wants to hear more? Come along tomorrow night, Wednesday night.
That's right. Sounds like it was inspiring.
No, there's some amazing stories which I'm going to share, but like incredible stuff. Really,
right.
It was, and then of course we had the bonus of the perks where we went to Ir David, as I said, so amazing stuff there.
And you were in Miran, right, which is connected to this week as well.
We were in Miran, just coming back from the north. We took a detour because every day we davened mincha together and Mariv together. So we did a detour to daven mincha at Miran, which is the burial place of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
This week is his yahrzeit.
The author of the Zohar. This week is his yahrzeit, the Lag BaOmer. So that was very, very, very special. Kotel was very special. Shabbos was really special. And, also, like you say, it's a new community I didn't know, but I love learning about new communities. Also, great community, full of faith. Wow, such faith, such strength. Amazing stuff. Amazing.
All right.
We'll
be back here next week.
Please God. All the best, everyone. Have a great day.